What if the ancient myths weren't just stories, but blueprints for the soul? In the Divine Archetype, Why Myths Still Matter, we journey into the symbolic heart of human culture to uncover why these timeless tales still resonate today. From heroic quests to cosmic battles, myths carry hidden wisdom about who we are, where we came from, and where we're going. These are not just relics of the past, they are maps of the inner world. Join us as we decode the archetypes that shape our lives and reveal the spiritual truths modern minds have forgotten. Myths matter, now more than ever. In an age dominated by science, data, and technology, the word myth is often tossed aside as fiction, falsehood, or fantasy. But this is a modern misunderstanding. Myths were never meant to be literal accounts of history. They are symbolic stories, living codes, through which ancient cultures explored the deepest truths about the cosmos, the soul, and the human experience. Far from being irrelevant relics, myths are enduring tools of spiritual navigation. They provide what we might call divine archetypes, universal patterns that still guide, shape, and awaken us today. So why do myths still matter? Because they speak the language of the soul. They help us remember who we are, where we come from, and where we are going. The nature of archetypes. The concept of the archetype was brought into modern thought by psychologist Carl Jung, who argued that certain patterns and symbols recur in human consciousness across all cultures and times. These archetypes, like the hero, the wise old man, the mother, the trickster, and the shadow, are not just literary devices. They are blueprints of the human psyche. In mythology, these archetypes come alive through gods, monsters, trials, and transformations. They show us how to face the chaos of life, how to die and be reborn, how to walk through darkness and come out changed. They are divine not because they belong to any one religion, but because they reveal something sacred and universal within us all. Myths as mirrors of the self. When we read myths, we are not just reading about ancient deities or epic battles. We are reading about ourselves. Prometheus stealing fire from the gods is not just about rebellion. It is the fire of consciousness, the divine spark that defies limitation. Psyche's descent into the underworld in her quest for Eros is not just a fairy tale. It is the soul's journey through trials to awaken love. Osiris being dismembered and reassembled by Isis is not just Egyptian drama. It's a symbolic map of death, resurrection, and transformation. These myths persist because they mirror the inner life. They speak to the parts of us that reason alone cannot touch, the parts that feel, suffer, dream, and long for transcendence. Sacred patterns in story. Every culture has myths. From the Aboriginal Dreamtime to the Norse sagas, from the Hindu epics to the Native American trickster tales, we see repeating patterns. This is not coincidence, it is revelation. Take the hero's journey, a structure identified by Joseph Campbell. It appears in the stories of Moses, Buddha, Hercules, King Arthur, and even modern characters like Frodo Baggins or Luke Skywalker. Why does it repeat? Because it represents the universal pattern of growth. The hero leaves the familiar, descends into the unknown, faces trials, gains wisdom, and returns changed. This is not just a tale, it is the cycle of human development. We all undertake this journey again and again throughout our lives. Why modern society needs myth. In the modern world, we have lost the shared mythic framework that once guided societies. Religion no longer holds a central role in many people's lives. Science, while powerful, cannot provide existential meaning. As a result, we see an increase in depression, anxiety, and a sense of disconnection. People are spiritually hungry, but don't always know what they are hungry for. Myths feed that hunger. They don't offer quick answers. They offer deep questions, powerful symbols, and pathways toward integration. Myths teach us how to face grief, how to endure chaos, how to become whole. In a world overwhelmed by surface distractions, myths call us inward, to the sacred, the symbolic, and the eternal. Myth and the inner world. Psychologically, myths function like dreams. They bypass the rational mind and go straight to the unconscious. That's why a myth can feel true, even if it's not factually true. When we hear of Icarus flying too close to the sun, we feel the warning. When we hear of Inanna's descent into the underworld, we recognize our own descent into grief or transformation. In this way, myths are therapeutic. They help us give shape to our emotions and our crises. They tell us we're not alone. Every fear, every desire, every struggle we face has been told before in sacred story. And through that telling, we find meaning and strength. Archetypes in today's culture. Even if we no longer study ancient myths, we still consume them, disguised in books, films, and art. Superhero movies are modern myths. Fantasy novels, dystopian sagas, and science fiction epics are all reimaginings of archetypal structures. The gods may have new names, Iron Man instead of Hephaestus, Katniss instead of Artemis, but the essence remains. These modern myths speak to the same deep needs. We still want to see the triumph of good over evil, the reconciliation of opposites, the redemption of the broken. We are still looking for the hero within ourselves. We are still searching for the divine pattern. The mythic lens, a way of seeing. To live mythically is to view life not just as random events, but as sacred unfolding. It means asking not just what happened, but what does this mean? It means seeing suffering as initiation, love as divine union, aging as sacred wisdom. It means treating our dreams, symbols, and inner experiences with reverence. This does not mean rejecting reason or science. It means adding depth to them. A mythic lens allows us to interpret our lives with more richness and purpose. It restores enchantment, not by fantasy, but by reawakening the soul. Myths and the sacred feminine. One of the most powerful contributions of myth is its preservation of a sacred feminine, a force often diminished in patriarchal religion and society. Through goddesses like Isis, Kali, Demeter, and Sophia, we see a reverence for the earth, the body, intuition, creation, and transformation. These feminine archetypes balance the more linear, masculine drive for conquest and control. Today, as we face ecological collapse and emotional burnout, these feminine myths are returning with urgency. They remind us to listen, to nourish, to honor the cycles of life and death. They offer a vision of wholeness that integrates rather than dominates. The shadow side of myth. But not all myths are comfortable. Some challenge us, disturb us, even terrify us. Myths like the story of Medusa, the Minotaur, or the biblical book of Revelation contain darkness. Why? Because life contains darkness. Myths do not deny the shadow, they include it. They help us face it without being destroyed. They show us how to confront the monster within and come out wiser. In a world that encourages constant positivity and surface gloss, myth gives us permission to feel, to wrestle, to transform. Myth as a spiritual technology. In traditional cultures, myth was not entertainment, it was sacred instruction. It was encoded wisdom passed down orally or ritually. Myths were used in initiation rites, healing ceremonies, agricultural festivals, and spiritual education. In this sense, myth is a kind of spiritual technology, a method for aligning human life with cosmic order. It's a system for transmitting values, virtues, and sacred truths. When we return to myth with reverence, we are not becoming primitive. We are becoming whole. Myths are not lies, they're deeper truths. We often think of truth in binary terms. Either something is true or false, historical or imagined. But myth operates on a different level. Myth is symbolic truth. It is not concerned with dates, locations, or provable facts. It is concerned with meaning, purpose, and soul. Did Orpheus really go to the underworld? Did Isis really resurrect Osiris? Did a great flood really wipe out the world? That's not the point. The question is, what do these stories reveal about the human condition? About suffering, love, loss, sacrifice, and rebirth? Myths are true not because they happened, but because they happen all the time. The return of the mythic. In every age of history, through war and peace, empires and revolutions, droughts and miracles, myths have been humanity's sacred compass. Not just as relics of ancient cultures, but as living vessels of wisdom. They rise when reason alone falls short. They speak when logic grows silent. And now, in our own age of rapid change, disconnection, and existential fatigue, myths are quietly rising again, not to pull us back into superstition, but to help us recover what we've lost. Soul. In a world obsessed with speed, surface, and certainty, myth offers stillness, depth, and mystery. It does not offer easy answers. It offers true questions. It does not simplify. It awakens. Indeed, the myth lives on. And more than ever, we need it to. What is a myth, really? Contrary to popular belief, a myth is not simply a lie or a mistaken belief. It is not the opposite of truth. It is a different kind of truth. Myth is symbolic language. It speaks to the soul in metaphor, image, and pattern. While science explains how things happen, myth explores why they matter. A myth is a story that never really happened, but is always happening. It is a mirror of the soul projected onto the cosmos. It tells us not what is, but who we are and what we long for. From the trials of Gilgamesh to the temptation of Eve, from the trickery of Loki to the wisdom of the Buddha, myths give shape to the human experience. They name our fears, elevate our hopes, and connect us to something greater than the self. Myths in times of crisis. Historically, myths have emerged most powerfully during times of rupture, when societies face collapse, transformation, or reawakening. Mythic cycles are born in moments when old structures fail and new paths are uncertain. This is precisely the kind of moment we now inhabit. We are living through a global identity crisis. Technological progress has outpaced spiritual development. We are hyperconnected and profoundly lonely. The climate is unraveling. Institutions are failing. Meaning itself feels like a luxury few can afford. And in this void, people are turning inward, searching for something enduring, something sacred, something that matters. This is where myth re-enters, not as fantasy, but as medicine. Not superstition, but soul. It's important to be clear. Reclaiming myth does not mean abandoning reason. It does not mean rejecting science, history, or critical thinking. Rather, it means recognizing that not all truth is factual. Some truths are emotional, psychological, archetypal, or spiritual. They live not in the brain, but in the body, in dreams, in ritual, in intuition. We are not returning to myths because we believe in literal gods living on mountaintops or talking serpents in gardens. We return to them because they speak symbolically to our inner landscape. They help us recover our relationship to soul, something the modern world has neglected. To lose myth is to lose depth. To lose myth is to reduce the world to mechanisms and measurements. To reclaim myth is to remember that life is not just something we calculate. It is something we feel, endure, love, lose, and transform through. The mythic imagination. At the heart of myth is the mythic imagination, the ability to see the world not just as data, but as story. Mythic imagination does not ask, what is the market trend? It asks, what story are we living in? This shift in perception is vital. Instead of seeing the climate crisis as a mere environmental problem, we might see it as a mythic breakdown of humanity's relationship with the Earth Mother, a sacred rupture begging for ritual repair. Instead of viewing depression as a chemical imbalance alone, we might also see it as a descent into the underworld, a dark night of the soul, echoing Persephone's fall or Inanna's journey through the seven gates. These aren't just poetic frames. They are healing frames. Because when we interpret our lives mythically, we don't just endure events, we transform through them. Archetypes that still breathe. Myths endure because they're carried by archetypes, universal symbols that reside deep in the human psyche. Whether we realize it or not, we are still living out these patterns every day. The hero, the one who leaves home, faces trials, and returns transformed. Every time we begin a new journey or overcome adversity, we walk this archetypal path. The shadow, the part of ourselves we reject or fear. It appears in our nightmares, our addictions, our projections. But confronting the shadow is the first step to integration. The trickster, the unpredictable force of chaos and change. He teaches us through disruption, forcing us to rethink and renew. The Great Mother, she births, nurtures, and destroys. Found in Gaia, Isis, Mary, and Kali, she reminds us that life is cyclical, not linear. These archetypes aren't fictional, they're foundational. They live beneath our identities, jobs, politics, and technologies. They animate our dreams, relationships, fears, and longings. And they never go out of date. The revival of myth in culture. You don't need to read ancient texts to see the mythic revival. It's already happening all around us. Fantasy and sci-fi genres dominate film and literature, repackaging old archetypes in modern clothing. Superhero films follow the hero's journey to the letter. Popular shows like Game of Thrones and Stranger Things evoke ancient motifs of power, death, rebirth, and the unknown. Even the language of light versus darkness, awakening, calling, inner child, or ego death in modern psychology and spirituality is rooted in mythic thought. Why this resurgence? Because our souls are starved. Because data can't nourish the heart. Because we don't just need more content, we need context. And myth provides that. It places us inside a sacred narrative. The sacred return of the feminine. A crucial aspect of the mythic revival is the return of the sacred feminine. For centuries, patriarchal systems have favored linear logic, domination, and separation from nature. But myths have preserved a deeper balance. Through goddesses like Isis, Inanna, Kali, Demeter, and Sophia, myth reminds us of the feminine archetypes. Intuition, nurturance, cyclical wisdom, embodied knowledge, and the power of transformation. These are not just women's themes, they are human themes. In today's world of burnout, ecological crisis, and emotional repression, the feminine principle offers renewal. The rise of feminine myths reflects a cultural healing process, a rebalancing of the masculine and feminine within society and within the soul. The shadow of myth, misuse and misinterpretation. Of course, myths can be misused. They can become dogma. They can fuel nationalism, religious extremism, or oppression. Just look at how the chosen people motif has been weaponized, or how messianic myths have justified violence. This is why it's essential to approach myth consciously. Myth is powerful. It shapes belief, identity, and destiny. When unconscious, it can enslave. When conscious, it can liberate. We must not live out myths blindly. We must learn to read them, interpret them, and evolve with them. Living mythically today. So what does it mean to live mythically in the 21st century? It means seeing your life not as a series of accidents, but as a sacred unfolding. It means honoring dreams, symbols, and intuition as valid forms of knowing. It means viewing challenges as initiations and relationships as mirrors. It means asking, what archetype am I living right now? What mythic pattern is repeating in my life? What deeper story is trying to emerge through me? To live mythically is not to escape reality. It is to deepen it. It is to find meaning within the chaos, not beyond it. The future of myth. Will myth survive the digital age? Will AI algorithms and virtual reality erase the ancient patterns? Not likely. Because myths don't live in books, they live in us. In our fears, in our rituals, in our storytelling. As long as humans ask, who am I? Or why do I suffer? Or what is beyond death? Myth will rise to meet the question. The real challenge is not whether myth will survive, but whether we will awaken to its power before it's too late. Because without myth, we are adrift. We mistake information for wisdom. We forget the sacred. We forget the soul. But with myth, we remember. The story isn't over. The myth lives on, not in temples, but in us. In the stories we tell our children. In the symbols that haunt our dreams. In the moments when life suddenly feels full of meaning. In every age, myths rise to meet the soul's hunger. Today, that hunger is palpable. We don't need to worship Zeus or believe in dragons, but we do need to reclaim the symbolic, the sacred, the storied life. Because in myth, we are reminded that we belong to something ancient, eternal, and alive. So let's not discard the myths. Let us reawaken them, because the myth never truly dies. It waits, and now more than ever, it is calling. The myths were never meant to be forgotten. They were meant to be lived. As we've seen, these ancient archetypes still pulse through our dreams, our stories, and our struggles. They remind us that we are part of something greater, something eternal. If this journey into the divine archetype sparked something in you, don't let it fade. Like, share, and subscribe to keep exploring the truths that lie beneath the surface of history and imagination. Because myths aren't just old tales, they're sacred echoes calling us home. Until next time, stay curious, stay open, and remember, the story isn't over.